My name is Bart van der Velpen. I'm the Global Program Director Net Zero Industries at Royal HaskoningDHV, a global consulting engineering company leveraging cutting-edge consulting and engineering solutions. My role at Royal HaskoningDHV is focused on developing feasible solutions to help the energy-intensive industries to decarbonize and to defossilize. The last 10 years, I'm involved in designing and implementing net zero programs for different energy-intensive industries. These programs have shown that smart implementation of decarbonization and defossilization results in an acceleration of the industrial transition and in the strengthening of its competitiveness. Today, I'm hosting the roundtable B3, Sustainability as Accelerator for Industrial Transition and Competitiveness. I hope to meet you there and to inspire you and at the same time to hear your views concerning this very important topic.
Hi, I'm Beth Uhlhorn, Director of Product Safety and Compliance at Dow, and I'm excited to join the conversation on sustainability as an accelerator for industrial transition and competitiveness. The chemical industry is facing an era of enormous transformation. Innovation, challenges, and opportunities are converging, and how we respond will define our future. An evolving regulatory landscape and sustainability and clean technology trends will drive us to consider new offerings and new business models. I'm excited to share how Dow is approaching this new world in chemistry.
Hi, I am Ethan Mirsky, Chief Product and Strategy Officer for NobleAI. We are a provider of AI-powered software that empowers chemical and energy companies to accelerate the development of better performing, safer, and more sustainable chemicals, materials, and formulations. Sustainability and compliance are major drivers of industrial transformation in the chemical industry today, and we believe that science-based AI tools can help companies increase competitiveness while making this transition. I'm looking forward to discussing this with you today. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kevin Norfleet. I'm the Global Sustainability Director at Celanese. If you're not familiar with Celanese, we are a large global chemicals and materials companies. My role at the company is focused on leveraging our sustainability to support our standard products, as well as driving sales of our sustainable product portfolio using mass balance. In particular, beginning of last year, we started up one of the largest carbon capture and utilization projects in the world, and so have been actively marketing materials made from that project for the past year.
So we're going to start with the last session of this morning, and that will be the sustainability as an accelerator for industrial transition and competitiveness. And transition is in fact green and digital, and that's the reason why I'm very happy that Kevin, Beth and Ethan are here, because they're completely different perspectives about the same challenges that the industry faces. And before we going to go deep dive in the whole thing, I would like to not reintroduce, because that's already done, but at least to give you a very short perspective about the first issue, and it is: can sustainability strengthen the business rationale of the industry or your company? So I would ask Kevin, please, could you give your view about that?
Yeah, so my name is Kevin Norfleet with Celanese, obviously, and I think the short answer to the question is yes. I mean, particularly when we talk about Western industry, where we've got a long history and track record of doing a lot around energy efficiency. You know, we have a great advantage, and I think part of our role as Western industry is to take advantage of that and to make sure that, you know, as companies want to move towards more sustainability, that they can appreciate the value of producers who have invested a lot in being able to make products more efficiently.
And I guess I would say not only yes we can, but yes we must. You know, you spoke about Western industry, and what I would say is right now, the large multinational chemical companies, we really are at a point where we have to transform. There's a lot of overcapacity in parts of the industry. There are a lot of new parties entering in less regulated areas. And so, you know, we have to lean into what we have developed over time as an advantage. And it has to be the path forward, because otherwise there may be no other path forward.
And you, Ethan?
I completely agree. It's the uncontroversial opinion. But no, I think that at least from our perspective, we see sustainability when you're in the interest of innovation. You need to make a change for competitive reasons, if for no other. Including sustainability in that equation only makes sense because you're going to have to deal with that at some point anyway. So do it now. And again, from my perspective, having the tools to make that easy is just lowers the barrier.
Now, what we have asked the three people here on the table is to illustrate that. So what are, for example, Kevin is helping the Celanese to become more sustainable. What does it mean? That's the same for Beth and also for Ethan. So both the three are have given me some slides. So I'm going to present. Okay, and then we can continue.
Yeah,
Please.
Yeah. So, I think from Celanese's perspective, part of the reason I'm part of this panel is, you've heard in some of the earlier sessions talking about, like with 12, like taking CO2 and turning it into fuel. And from a Celanese perspective, one of the big things that we've done really for over a year now is we started up what is one of the largest carbon capture and utilization projects in the world, really at the beginning of 2024. And just to give you some context, some scale, so this project, which is outside of Houston, we're taking 180,000 tons a year of CO2 emissions and turning that into methanol. So this is a really large-scale project that is actually up and running today. Now, Celanese, we're one of the largest non-fuel consumers of methanol in the world. So we're not an energy company, we're a materials company. And so for us, this isn't about taking CO2 and turning it into energy. It's about taking CO2 and turning it into chemistry solutions, turning it into, products. And so a lot of the conversation today has, talked about, the challenges of how do you actually communicate these things? How do you get these benefits through the chain? And that's a big part of, our challenge is we do have this great platform. Today, it's about 8% of the methanol that we produce at that facility in Clear Lake, Texas. But as a company, methanol is this huge raw material, and we would love nothing more than to be able to develop a market for things made from CO2 so that we can continue to make more methanol from CO2 and make more of that methanol feed into our, huge portfolio of products that can come from that. And so, we're kind of in a different space on the chain of really now very focused on what is, I would say, more of a marketing problem of particularly something like carbon capture and utilization. It's not the typical pathways that brands and companies are used to thinking about for sustainable content. It's not recycle, it's not bio, it's kind of this sort of in-between scenario. So if we jump to the next slide, show a bit more detail, and I know this is a lot to see on the little screen there, but the other thing I do want to highlight with this is we depend on the mass balance concept. We've talked about that in some other forums. I know Dow is doing a lot of similar things, but particularly from a chemical industry perspective, especially when we're talking about the very large kind of fundamental starting building blocks for, what basically the entire, material industry is made from, we need mass balance. Like, we cannot make brand new assets to make these new products when you're talking about these, very large starting points. We have to be able to start with a fraction of a process and grow that over time. So that's exactly what we're doing with our carbon capture and utilization project. I mentioned about 8% of now the methanol we make outside of Houston is now made from CO2 as the carbon source instead of natural gas. Most of that CO2 is actually coming from third-party sources. So we're taking CO2 from basically across our fence line and actually using it as a source of our chemistry. So you can see some of the applications. Again, that's a big part of kind of where we are today is, how do we take that downstream? How do we take it into something that is useful to a brand? And a lot of the stuff that's been talked about in the other sessions around, okay, carbon footprint. Like, how do you make it so that brands and companies will actually put a price on carbon and actually pay a little bit more for it? Because sustainability is great, but at the end of the day, it's also very much an economic problem where if nobody's willing to spend any money whatsoever, it's very hard to continue to make these kind of investments. So a big part of what we want to do is, demonstrate that there is value and that there is an opportunity to get what, frankly, in the case of CCU, can sometimes be a very nominal premium to make it make sense.
Amen.
So we can come back to this slide later. Okay. This is kind of stuck in for later reference. Yep.
So that's a very nice example how, in fact, you build building blocks, normal building blocks, Kevin, but then from a CCU perspective. Yeah. But what is also challenging, and you didn't mention that, but I would like to know how the decision was made to do that, because you take quite a lot of risks. So what was the process, and what's your experience about that?
Yeah, so I think it's a great example of you got to start with the low-hanging fruit when you talk about these kind of things. And I'll readily acknowledge, like, we are fortunate with where our site was in Houston to have some very high concentration sources of CO2 in close proximity. And so it's a much simpler starting point versus trying to go and build direct air capture or build capture capacity when you're talking about lower concentration CO2. The other aspect is hydrogen was a critical piece of this project, and I would describe this as a perfect example of, we don't want to let perfect be the enemy of good. We use a source of hydrogen that is what we describe as low carbon intensity hydrogen, but it is still fossil hydrogen. And the reason we do that is because, frankly, it's the only thing that's economical today. We would love to use green hydrogen made from renewable electricity, but it would absolutely destroy the economics of the project. And so by using a fossil hydrogen that's lower carbon footprint because it's co-product hydrogen, we can still achieve a very, very significant benefit in the carbon footprint of the product, but at the same time still be able to basically make an underlying economic case that allowed us to move forward with the investment to build the equipment that was necessary to do this and be able to actually operationalize something at this kind of 100 plus KT a year type scale.
Oh, perfect. Beth, now it's your turn.
Okay. So I'm going to cover an area that I think is really critical for Dow. Bear with me. I am definitely not Dow's expert on recycling of any sort. But when you think about the challenges that Dow faces in terms of sustainability, circularity and delivering circular solutions is among the most critical, certainly. And so we've laid out what we believe industrial transition in terms of circularity would look like. And you can see here in this figure that it includes a lot of infrastructure buildup in order to collect, clean, sort waste, and then embody or allow for both mechanical recycling and then what can't be mechanically recycled, advanced recycling. And I don't know how many of you yesterday heard Melanie Bauer from Exxon's presentation on advanced recycling, but she covered it really well, and all recycling and all of the things that are needed in order to support that. And one of the things that she said was, advanced recycling for things that can't be mechanically recycled, and that's Dow's position as well. We love the idea of a collection facility that can then stream into mechanical recycling, and then beyond that for things that can't be into advanced recycling. And certainly we look to things like AI solutions to help us with making sure that things go in the right place, right? And then if you'll go to the next slide, kind of leaning into, sorry, will you build this out? Thank you. Leading into kind of more my area of expertise, which is much more on the product safety side. For mechanical recycling particularly, there needs to be a way to ensure that raw material, which is garbage, is safe for reuse. And so what we've really undertaken at Dow in order to support that is a really, I think, innovative and comprehensive product safety assessment for Recycle It, where we bring in various sources of recycled material. We do initial qualifications. We look at the applications into which that recycled material will go. And then you can see there on the right of this slide, we have this pyramid built out where, at the bottom of that pyramid is the least sensitive applications, things that maybe you wouldn't worry about. A stream with some level of contaminants in it going into, all the way to the top of that pyramid with food contact, where, goodness, you want the most perfectly pure recycled material that you can get. So we do initial qualification and then periodic qualifications or periodic testing and analysis based on how those initial qualifications go and based on the application, such that we can really assure our customers that in the use that their application, the material that they purchase from us is well assessed and safe. And so this is the way that we've really adapted product safety to this new area of business for us. And also it's an entirely new area of business for Dow. And I mean, we are seeing, we're embarking on all sorts of new things as a part of it, from purchasing recyclers to, partnerships with some parties in the chemical recycling field, all sorts of new areas that Dow has had to dive into in order to transform and meet these sustainability challenges in front of us.
Thank you, Beth. So what you say is, in fact, that partnership is then a very crucial thing. Can you explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So, we've had a lot of partnerships in this space. I think probably the most well-known one, we are a member of the Alliance to End Plastic Waste, and that's a number of plastic producers and downstream parties coming together to really build out that whole infrastructure that you saw on that last slide. So investments through firms like Circulate Capital and some of the other big, focused investment funds. And then, recently we purchased a recycler called Circulus, and we have partnerships with advanced recyclers like Mura. And so, it's a lot of partnership ranging from coming together with competitors to stimulate the ecosystem, to mergers and acquisitions, to partnerships to deliver what we need.
Thank you. It's now your turn. So.
Okay, we can probably skip this slide. I mean, I think we've covered motivations. Although I would say that, the last panel talked a lot about regulation and driving things. There's a lot of motivators here for this kinds of transformations, whether that's sustainability coming from insurance, investors, all these things that have been talked about before. And we see our customers coming to us with these issues from a variety of different motivations. And one of the things, addressing that from both an assessment perspective as well as a ingredient replacement perspective, the key for us is seeing this as holistic, that you want to be able to not just solve one problem at a time. And that's for us, that's the power of an AI, is that being able to address many different factors at the same time. So a customer would come to us, the example I think I used yesterday of adhesives, where actually one of the original motivations was, hey, we want to make this product, we want a new product, we want to be able to make it cheaper, we want to have something of better performance. Oh, and by the way, can we make it safer along the way? Can we make the solvents easier? And the answer is yes, you can. If you open your perspective and say, let's look for the whole picture. Talking about the challenges, go to the next slide. And then the same thing goes on sort of the need for a platform that allows different users, whether that's again, the risk assessment side, the investor side, I've talked about this before, or the scientists in the lab, all looking at the same playbook. They're all looking at the data to be able to say, hey, what can we do? What's important here? Making sure everything aligns, that what you see as a problem is being addressed in the solution.
Thank you. If I want to give another perspective, in fact, what I see is that so Celanese is trying to build based on another way building blocks. You try to recycle, to have a closed loop. You are trying to get new molecules, you can say. But is not the whole question, shouldn't we think about new business models? Is that not the essence of the whole thing? And I would like to hear your views about that. Kevin?
I mean, I think when you talk about new business models, I think at the end of the day, I would describe it more as, we need a new market structures is really, I think, the need that essentially incentivize and look at different things, because you have to be able to make investments in sustainability make sense, and there's a number of different ways that can happen. I think, frankly, today, especially in kind of the world we live in right now, frankly, marketing is probably one of the best tools. I mean, being able to help brands communicate and differentiate. I mean, we heard earlier that many of the personal care beauty products want to be able to say things and are frankly struggling to get that data through the chain. So I think that's probably the biggest thing is, how do you create structures that allow kind of, the really big, hard to decarbonize industry that's at the front end of the chain to be able to do things and get those benefits recognized and passed through. And that sometimes is a really challenging thing to do. So I don't know if it's necessarily like we need whole new business models as much as we just need new market structures that look at that, because it's hard to make these investments make sense if there's no economic return. And then you get into situations of competitiveness. I mean, if at the end of the day, price is the only factor, and you're asked to compete with material coming from other regions that takes a very, very different view on sustainability, it's very hard to kind of bring those two factors together. So I would always say, I think it really comes to being able to get, and Joel kind of talked about earlier, being able to get the whole value chains to kind of build a structure that helps the end of the chain get what the beginning of the chain can potentially offer.
And because you're really in the beginning of that value chain, are you organize yourself around what the end user is willing, so that you know exactly what the end user wants, and that's the reason why you do it? Is that how you think, or that's a little bit too challenging?
I mean, I think with our carbon capture and utilization project, we were able to make that make sense in a way that was probably a little more of a leap than would typically be normal in the chemical industry, and so very much I would say more in we've built it and now we're trying to market it and sell it. That's not often the way that things work in the chemical industry.
No.
And so, to your question though, there's pockets in industries. I mean, one of the things that I think is fascinating, I love about the chemical industry is we have an opportunity to touch so many different end markets. I mean, especially when we're talking about basic chemicals, I mean, they literally go into everything. And so, what we see is that there are some market segments that are pretty sophisticated and are actually, buying sustainable products today and are willing to pay for it. However, that is still the exception rather than the norm in most cases. And so I would say it's, we need the leaders to kind of pave the way, but then we also need, more and more of that adoption as you go into, a wider and wider range of products.
Is it the same for them?
Yeah, I think exactly what you said in terms of thinking about maybe not new business models, but new ways of incorporating some of the services that we're offering or the sustainability benefits that we're offering into the pricing or into the marketing. And here again, I would kind of lean into what my product safety team brings to both our standard products, but also our circular products there. And, if you could see, okay, well, maybe there's a premium for recycled plastic, but then there's also the confidence that you know that that recycled plastic has been assessed and does not contain contaminants that you're concerned about, that kind of thing, you could see where you could start to price those kinds of things in and offer them as, maybe certifications, maybe, self-certifications, whatever it is, such that you could maybe generate more income from that.
And is it already the case today? Are people recognizing the recycled plastics, that it has a higher value from a social point of view in relation to virgin plastics?
Absolutely, there's a premium on recycled,
Okay.
yes, relative to virgin. And, our commercial teams keep wanting to get into those more sensitive applications, because those are really the ones that are very much also more willing to pay. And so, the balance is that obviously that requires a lot more resources to be able to assess that more often and more carefully. So, there's kind of the push-pull there, and we're working on that.
Okay. And Ethan, how do you see that from your point?
Yeah, so obviously, I'm in a different space or place in the industry here, but I think from my perspective, where this shows up in terms of a lot of it is consumer driven. Ultimately, it's the end user, as said here, that is making the decision. Do I buy recycled? Do I care enough about it to, even if it is the same price, to actually pick this one over that one? But I think that's growing. You're seeing more and more of that, and so being for us, one of our drivers is enabling companies to be flexible and adaptable quickly. So this is why I love the cosmetics and fragrances and things like that, because people change their preferences every few months, and you want a new product every few months, and being able to enable that at the same time doing that sustainably is enormously exciting, and you see that there happening more quickly, but I think you're seeing it happen in other industries as well. Just the timelines are a little bit longer.
Yep. Yeah, and also sustainability is, if everybody translates it in green, but it's in fact green and digital. It's all digital in fact that assumption. Can you elaborate a little bit more, Ethan, in relation to that? How can you combine in fact the two? Because otherwise, perhaps people here are asking, why is Ethan also on this table? It has nothing to do with green. But how can you help us to understand what that means, in fact, digital in relation to green? Sorry, it's perhaps a new question.
not sure what you're...
Well, maybe if I can jump in. I think there's tremendous need for data to be able to move through value chains, and I think that's where there's this digital and green kind of connection that's absolutely critical, because carbon footprint data is a great example. I think as chemical industry, particularly larger basic chemical producers, we actually I think have pretty good amount of data on carbon footprint of our products. But very, very often, in fact, most of the time, that data doesn't get to the end of the chain. There's a lot of producers and people along the way where the data gets lost because they're either not at the technical level, or maybe they don't have the economic resources to be able to invest in kind of carrying that forward and understanding how their footprints kind of are benefiting or being hurt by the inputs they're using. So that's just one example, but I think there's a huge amount of need if as industry we're going to be able to monetize it. It's the data needs to get to the other end of the chain.
Okay, yeah, and in that context, thank you. This is sort of outside the scope of my company's Noble specific business, but I will say I know we had a talk yesterday on the use of blockchains and on the use of AI for safety data sheet reading, and I think there was something mentioned today. I've definitely seen these kinds of digital tools, being able to source data from wherever it happens to be. So maybe that data is not in your country, but it's in some other country, has that data, to be able to consolidate all of that. And so I think that you're absolutely right, that there is a power for technology, for digital technology, to help facilitate the transparency that we're all looking for. It's not the only solution, or not the one and only answer, but I think it plays a big part.
Okay, thank you.
And you could see where big data could also help with some of the challenges with product safety assessment of mechanically recycled material too. I'm probably not smart enough in that area to think through all of the ways, but if there are ways to do those qualifications more quickly, do them more often, more easily assess, ground up plastic, that would be wonderful and would really help with chemical safety assessment of all products, but particularly recycled materials.
Yeah, but because, Beth, is it not a challenge? Because waste is not always very linked to transparency.
Yeah.
It's
garbage.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a huge challenge. That's my product stewardship director for the plastics business. He always says, look, we have no idea what this is. It's garbage. It's, and that's why we do have to assess it. So we have an analytical team, and then coupled with the toxicologists who then look at the characterization of those materials, and we do that initially with a lot of batches, and then based on how that initial load of batches looks, then we set a frequency for doing that on an ongoing basis, whether it's every 5 batches, every 10, whatever, on an ongoing basis, based on the purity of the material initially.
I have still 1 minute, if I understand. Is that correct?
15.
Sorry?
15.
Yeah, but that's for the audience. Yeah. But perhaps before I'm going to ask the audience something, compliancy. Compliancy can perhaps help to get that transparency. What is your view about that, Beth? Because I think that you are really struggling with the whole thing.
Oh,
in relation to the example that you have given, yeah.
I think one of the things that Dow would call for is recycled plastic targets in products. So, the extent to which the value chain can be stimulated by putting those targets on end products, that'll help that premium trickle back to a greater extent all the way back to us. So that's policy that we would call for, and globally. Extended producer responsibility. Also, we would also call for that kind of thing. Material agnostic, extended producer responsibility, but extended producer responsibility schemes. And then obviously mass balance, and maybe this is the time to kick it over to you to talk a little bit about what we want in that area.
Yes, maybe if we jump back on how easy it is to get back to the slide that I had earlier.
I have to?
Backwards, back to my presentation. That one. Yeah, next one. There we go. Yeah, for those not familiar with mass balance, I think this is what I see as one of the single biggest enablers of sustainability in the chemical industry, is getting to where mass balance is both widely recognized and accepted and also marketable within materials. And, frankly, from a society perspective, we're very, very comfortable with mass balance already in a number of areas. Mass balance has been used extensively in the fuels markets for decades. It's, very, very similar to what we accept with renewable electricity. We're very comfortable letting brands say that they're, making their products from renewable electricity, even though they're not actually getting their electricity directly from the windmill or solar panel. We understand that it goes through the grid, but that there's an allocation process. And so, as a chemical industry, we need that same flexibility because it is not carbon efficient to build new assets and to sub-optimize supply chains. So I do always kind of try to use any opportunity like this to just highlight the the imperative that mass balance be allowed, and not just allowed, but actually recognized and supported. I mean, I think it was mentioned yesterday, green guides, being able to give brands kind of the structure that allows them to confidently make claims using mass balance is tremendously important. And again, like maybe that means, putting the right caveats or whatever, but there needs to be a way where a brand can say, okay, if I do it this way, I can use mass balance in a way that is credible and understandable and believable. But that has to happen, because that's the only way we can make, kind of the large scale progress that we need to without it being prohibitively expensive.
Thank you. Are there questions from the audience?
Thank you very much. Jerker from Chemsec. A question on mass balance. Of course, I have to bring it up. When you are doing mass balance, do you have a physical connection between input and output? Because, for example, Exxon, they didn't have.
Yeah.
Because they had like a credit transfer. And I think, to me, it's acceptable with mass balance operations, as long as you can still not follow the money like we did before, but you can follow the atoms. I think that is important. So you do have a physical connection there.
Correct. And I mean, what I'll say is within mass balance, and this is one of the challenges of it, is there's a lot of different definitions of mass balance. And I mean, there's things that I would say are very safe and clear, and everybody would kind of say makes sense. I mean, as Celanese, we're very fortunate to have a value chain and a network that allows us to have physical connectivity relatively easily. So in our case, everything has physical connectivity. We also have what I would describe as kind of more linear chemistry, which means, we don't necessarily need things like free attribution. We can keep kind of the content very linked to the actual kind of, mass in is equivalent to kind of, the share of that, raw material in the final product. And it's simpler for us because for the most part, we take 2 or 3 things, put them together and make one thing. Unlike, other companies that maybe take 2 or 3 things in and make 12 things. So that, you get to very different problems. But yeah, there's a spectrum. In our case, we have physical connectivity. I mean, what I would say is important is that, from a policy perspective, that we understand that there's differences, and that what I think industry needs is clarity as to what are we okay with, what do we have questions about, what are we maybe not sure about, and kind of start to understand that and not take the approach of, well, let's just put all of mass balance to the side because we don't really understand it, because I would say that's what we see in some places. And that's a very damaging approach because it doesn't allow kind of innovation and progress to happen while you sort out some of those details.
I very much agree. As long as because there is such a big mass balance,
yes,
to be anything from credit transfer to really like batch-wise, you really know everything. But my question was actually, before you brought this up, when you mentioned low carbon hydrogen, and you said it comes from fossil fuel, then as a chemist, I can't really get that in my head, how it's working. Could you flesh that out a bit?
Can you go back one more slide? Yeah. So the most conventional way of making hydrogen in the U.S. is you would take natural gas and you would do that bottom reaction there, where you would basically take natural gas and turn it into CO2 and hydrogen and then vent all the CO2. So all of the carbon burden of making that hydrogen is going to the hydrogen. In our case, what I would say we're doing is kind of a good middle ground of, it's not as great as like a green hydrogen that's pure renewable electricity, but essentially we're using hydrogen where the carbon is actually going into a co-product, is being used to make a different chemistry. And so essentially that burden is being shared between the hydrogen and another product that's using the carbon. So for sure, it's still fossil, but it's a much lower carbon footprint hydrogen, but still a fossil hydrogen, and that's what gives us the ability to make the economics work today.
Okay, now because maybe we can have that discussion for the whole audience.
Okay, yeah, sounds good.
Because I'm interested as a chemist. Thank you.
Yeah.
Are there other questions? Yeah, Carolyn.
Yeah, I'm going to come back to Caroline with Mirsky Investment Services, going to come back to the mass balance discussion a little bit. And I appreciate the tension, and I recognize that there is a role for those types of tools to help drive innovation, obviously. And not just from your perspective, but to all the panel, I think want to better understand Because for us as an investment organization, we're obviously very cautious about the risks of greenwashing, and we've seen evidence of that specifically through the use of mass balance in some cases. And so want to, I guess, maybe understand the use of mass balance as a tool, but not as a crutch. And I think just cautious of sometimes when we have tools like this where industries can, sort of, I don't want to say play around with the numbers, but utilize tools like mass balance. Is there a risk that it then becomes a crutch that further prevents really driving towards the change that I think collectively we agree we need to go towards?
Yeah. So I would give, I think, an example there, and Beth, I'm sure you probably have others, but a couple things. So, I mean, first off, renewable electricity, I think we've shown that the concept can work to really help a market for renewable electricity grow and build and develop at a way that's scalable. And I would say it's the same thing for mass balance. I mean, you're exactly right. Like, it's important that you have structure, that you have rules, because, if you're not doing it carefully, there's absolutely ways that it can be abused. And as an industry, we need to be very careful of that, because you're right, that doesn't help anything. However, mass balance, when it's done correctly, is really the only way you can make buying drastically more expensive raw materials make sense and be able to start to, scale these efforts. And, we have a product that we make that's, kind of a specialty plastic resin used for very niche applications, but it's 100% made from methanol. And in Europe with mass balance, what we're seeing is, we've been able to grow sales of the products made from a biomethanol version or input. And using mass balance, we're starting to be able to get what I would say is an eventual line of sight to maybe one day being able to convert an entire large-scale facility. Now, we're not there today, but mass balance is starting to make it so you can kind of see the light at the end of the tunnel to say, okay, you can see where maybe one day we don't need mass balance because we're growing the sales enough of the mass balance products where you can start to see, hey, maybe we could actually get a true biomethanol delivery that actually, changes the actual molecules. But like when you're starting out, that's incredibly difficult. I mean, to be competitive, to leverage the scale, you're dealing with, taking thousands of tons at a time of product, and you just can't jump to that very easily with these more expensive feedstocks. So it's a great point, though.
And Beth?
Yeah, I would echo that 100%. I think, your renewable energy example is really good, that I buy renewable energy on my electricity bill. It does not come, my own energy is not solar and wind. I am instead incentivizing the electricity companies to support and capitalize investment in those kinds of technologies. And it's the same thing with mass balance approach in circularity and in low carbon. We're incentivizing the right behavior, right? And so better to do it at any scale than make sure that something is 100% something.
Yeah, the problem is with the chemical industry is also that a lot of chemicals are commodities, and that's the whole problem. And that means large volumes and very competitive. Mm-hmm. So, and if we're not going to accept mass balances, you will never get what you should have, because you cannot compete from the start already, because you're dealing with commodities. The advantage is that naturally you can also say commodity can be a special thing, but that will always be a niche. And that's the whole thing. So I think it's very important that we realize, and naturally transparency is a very important thing, that it is not a greenwashing thing, but that we have to accept mass balances. And that's worldwide. I'm not talking about the US or the UK or the EU, but really it's a very important thing. And thank for the attention, and I would say please go to the dinner, because I think that you can eat. Yeah, thanks. The session illustrated that sustainability can clearly be an accelerator for the transition of the industry. What does that mean? We have made a connection between green and digital. And it is clear that if digital is not a part of your green strategy, that it is quite difficult to accelerate your transition using sustainability.